Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading White Women Get Ready, How Healing Post-Traumatic Mistress Syndrome Leads to Anti-Racist Change. I'm reading through this book for my own practice of deconstructing the delusion of white supremacy, and if you would like to read along with me, you can get copies attached here. Chapter 6, Damsel in Distress and Other White Lies. If Southern white men are not careful, they will overreach themselves and public sentiment will have a reaction. A conclusion will then be reached, which will be very damaging to the moral reputation of their women. Ida B. Wells. Nothing in the world is easier in the United States than to accuse a black man of crime. W.E.B. Du Bois. I have always liked boys. In my earliest recollection of this awareness, I am laying on the top bunk bed I share with my younger sibling. Rainbow bright sheets pulled up snugly under my chin. The roar of the slightly off-balance ceiling fan overhead. As I began to drift off to sleep, I sweetly visualized a certain preschool classmate veering through the playground mulch on his big wheel. This sandy-haired, blue-eyed white boy was my first crush. Many followed. In kindergarten, I expressed my affection in a variety of ways. During recess, when the boys declared their intent to chase after and capture the girls, I rejected their boys rule propaganda and organized the girls to chase after them instead. This sounds like my child. During nap time, I would frequently edge up to one of my many love interests and, once the lights were dim, spend the half hour whispering and planting kisses behind their ears. I'm pretty sure I got this notion from an ad I saw on TV. Both my playground and naptime shenanigans, along with my long list of childhood crushes, included both black and white boys. And later in elementary school, when I had a classmate of Mexican descent, it included him too. In some ways, the multiculturalists got this one right. As someone who grew up surrounded with many examples of interracial families, my early love of boys did not necessarily racially discriminate. In fact, I was far more likely to discriminate across class lines, feeling much less attracted to the white boys who lived in subsidized housing than my scholastically achieving black classmates. Of course, there was still a racial component to my class bias, since the ideal of whiteness has been defined in terms of upper middle classness. Poor whites have historically had their whiteness policed by elites. In 19th and early 20th century relationships with black men, poor white women could figuratively lose their whiteness because such relationships placed white women outside white space. According to historian Lisa Lindquist Dorr, the poorer the white woman, the more likely she was to be viewed as morally depraved and thus outside the full scope of white patriarchal protection. That I was comfortably allowed to be unaware of my white girlness within the context of these infatuations, playground chases, and naptime kisses can also be attributed to my race and class privilege, which shielded me from the knowledge of potential consequences. The most punishment I ever received from my grade school teacher was an indication that I should stop the naptime kisses, offered as she suppressed a smile. More importantly, I was not privy to if, when, or at what age my black classmates were warned of the historic and lasting dangers of pursuing and or rejecting the advances of white girls and women. That history is a gruesome one, which I have struggled to fully expose myself to and implicate myself in. I avoided preparing for this chapter for months, moving stacks of books on the subject from one side of the room to another, shelving and reshelving titles like Dorr's White Women, Rape, and the Power of Race in Virginia, 1900s to 1960, in hopes that the harsh titles might disappear, or better yet, transmit only the most critical information into the recesses of my mind from the safety of their shelves, so I could avoid the emotional pain of reading and especially feeling this horrible history. Yet, moving with and through feeling is paramount to our work with Mistress Syndrome. And, after being gently called in by Felicia on this topic, I eventually found myself under a comforting blanket with pen and notebook in hand, ready to open the pages, read, and process this repulsive section of our history. And stay tuned for tomorrow because the next section is called Purity and Paternalism.